Hello and welcome to the dive presented by Honda, Season 5, Episode 11, and we have quite the episode for you today. All-Pro announcements, patch notes, previews of this coming weekend's playoff matches.
Making it rain on them.
Yeah, exactly. Making it rain the content. We got all kinds of topics out here. We're handing them out, Azael.
Do you always do the episode numbers with your hands? I never noticed that. Now I'm really curious.
I feel like maybe it's like 50%.
50%?
It might be a little bit less.
I feel like it's 100%, but it's just off camera sometimes. You're like,
yeah. That may be the case.
With using his hands to count up to 11 so he can...
72, 73, 70.
What were we last week? Somebody check the tapes. We're boxed in with the working from home, having it actually really cropped out, especially with people's individual setups too. There's all kinds of stuff that goes on off screen you can't see anymore.
Yeah, and Travis is just riding around on a unicycle just off screen to your side.
That's why Kobe's such a professional. You never see him even acknowledge it. All the honking noises.
This damn circus.
Whereas anytime your cat
here
just walks into your room, Mark, you're just like, huh?
Yeah. Every time a cat even looks at me, I'm like, do you need me?
I must go. My people are calling.
Let's start with the All-Pro then. As the All-Pro was released, all three teams at once here.
Yep.
Firing off. Honestly, I was surprised by quite a few of the winners until I started thinking about it from like popularity and fan perspective and stuff. And then I was like, okay. No, I see some of them. I definitely had some different votes there. So.
From the plebs' point of view, you understand it, but from us intellectuals,
yeah,
I'm with you. There's quite a few that like I don't think were huge like whiffs or anything like that. Where it's like, what the hell is this guy doing there? But there were some where I'm like, oh, I'm surprised that this was not the way that I had voted it.
But I mean, CoreJJ first team, I think was surprising. I didn't think he had a fantastic split. That to me felt like a little bit of a carryover from how good he's been for the last couple of years. It's like, yeah, he may still be the best player in the league, but I don't think he was, the best player of this split, right? I think that some people did outperform him. Or at the very least, I think Vulcan probably outperformed him. It's pretty tight, beyond that. But that one was a little bit surprising to me. I'm not sure where you guys landed on the perks versus PoE stuff. I know there was some conversation about that. I felt like no mid laner really stood out from the rest, like as far as like was like super dominant. So first team for me was a pretty close affair between perks and PoE.
Yeah, mine was actually swung pretty heavily by I asked a bunch of mid laners. I asked 4 different LCS mid laners who puts more pressure on you. Who would you not want to play against more? And all of them said perks. But if you think about that in the context of their play styles, that makes a lot of sense, right? PoE's big strengths have been not huge pressure in lane on people, making them feel like, oh, I don't want to play against this player, but carrying a lot of those team fights for the team, teleporting to the weak sides of the map to protect his teammates. So I think that's where a lot of the value there from PoE as well. So I accept people's arguments for either multiple mid laners actually for this time around. I wasn't too perturbed by any of those differences.
Yeah, mid was a close one. I still went with perks just because I really value the playmaking that he brings. And I know PoE has been better this split about it, but he's not very lane dominant. And I know he plays a lot of control mages, but he also played Syndra 5 times. Like you can win more matchups than I think he did with that champion. And so I thought he was really good. And I think Kobe said that no one's jumped out of the pack this time around, so I could understand why PoE got some of the votes, but I thought perks, while having some lower lows, you could say, I never thought there were times where I was like, oh my god, what is PoE doing? He's running it. Whereas there's a time where I was like, oh my god, perks, be careful. But at the same time, he also had the most solo kills pre-15 for a reason, because he takes risks, and I am totally down to take a risk and see you make a play that might not work out to also kill the guy in lane phase quite consistently, where that was something that PoE never does. Almost.
Yeah, that's what I think of when I think of Mark. He's a risk taker. He's really living life on the edge.
Did you cook that chicken enough?
I think a couple of the other notable snubs, or at least for me, were I would say Afro and Huhi. You know, I think support was really hard. I think we touched on this a little bit last week, but I felt like, or at least I tweeted about it. I think that there was at least 5 people that were really well within consideration for top 3 for support. You know, I ended up having Afro as my 3rd team. So I was a little bit sad to see, you know, that he didn't make it in. I wasn't really shocked, I think, either. Because like Sword Art and CoreJJ also had really good splits and are very big names. You know, that wasn't really a surprise to me, but I felt like those guys at least deserve a mention.
You know what? I saw this coming as far as you know, where our sections are placed. You know, I'm going to call an audible. We're moving the Honda MVP section up to the beginning of the show this time around.
Oh, baby.
Because it literally is this topic. And we could just go all in on it right now so we don't have to, you know, circle back around later. Our Honda MVP section this week is actually, who is your MVP that did not make the all LCS Pro Team, any of the teams? I want to see if we actually bring similar people, because you already were touching on you are already touching on one of mine there as well.
Right hand up, Afro move. Did you do it, Kobe? Were you on the Afro move train?
2 Afro moves. I actually was. I'm gonna go with support as well, but I was gonna say Huhi. I was actually. Part of it I was really surprised is the point totals. If you look, you know, supports dropped all the way down to, you know, Sword Art only got 46 points, whereas Vulcan and CoreJJ, they were up there 90 and 100 points. So everybody had them somewhere on their ballots. But then it makes sense that the 3rd spot was heavily contested between Sword Art, Huhi, and Afromu, and it being split between 3 different supports, as you know, people have all of those as contenders on their list. And it actually, you know, kind of shows in the point total. So it makes a little bit more sense if you look at it that way.
Yeah.
I thought Afro was actually really good. I did include him, and I would put him for this kind of Honda MVP section of, you know, who didn't make it, that you be your MVP. I would say Afro because
I included him too. I actually didn't include
Did all 3 of us have him?
Even though Huhi is my, you know, snubbed, not all pro player, I had Afromu on there as well.
Yeah, I thought one of the things that he had in his back pocket for why I put him over, say, Sword Art, whereas I think Sword Art maybe ended the season playing in a higher form, he had a lot of struggles early on in the year that were pretty bad. If you go back and remember, like, that freak section where he was talking about all the mechanical misplays and decision-making in the first week and a half or so of it. Whereas Afro, he had some bad games, but there wasn't like this stretch where I was like, oh my God, Afro, what are you doing? And he had a pretty consistent level over the course of the entire split, and it was a very high level. And it was one of the big reasons I think that Dig was a playoff team. And that's why I ended up going for Afro on my ballot, because I was like, wait, you know, if I look back at their entire splits, he was one of the only players in the support position which didn't have like really big bad stretches and I think, you know, CoreJJ as well. You could say that maybe it just wasn't his peaks weren't as high, but I definitely valued that a little bit more, even if I would take Sword Art, you know, on my actual team or something.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think to add on also how well he worked with Neo, like right out the gate. You know, a lot of times people don't really click right away, and people are quick to talk about, well, it's their first split, or they need time, or Neo's young, you know, it's not going to work right away. But they were great, pretty much right out the gate, right? And they actually worked well as a duo, not just for the laning phase, but I think that, you know, some of the best moments for Afro were moments where him and Neo were playing really well together in a team fight. You know, there was one really notable base defense where, you know, the fight starts up and he's already used his headbutt to knock someone away, like a rel on a disengage, and then he just Q flashes, hits both the carries, and at the same time, like during that, Neo is like up in the air in his Azael and just like flash E pulls the feathers through. You know, they win this big fight in the base, and they're able to, you know, turn on the game off that and win the game. And they had some really strong moments, I think, as far as their team fighting. So I agree with you. What do you think for Huhi there, Kobe?
For why he got snubbed, I think there are a lot of people, and you can see by the numbers as well, we're giving so much credit to FBI, but started to fall off on Huhi, and Huhi has done a tremendous amount for this lane. If you look at the lane phases, so much of it is Huhi, you know, taking brush control, you know, putting pressure on the enemy AD carry as well. So I feel like he got snubbed this way and you know, people started to load their their 100 Thieves love onto FBI and vote him up in there. And they're like, you know what? There's just too many other good supports right now, which is fair. You know, like we're saying, it's a lot of these roles were actually packed, and we could see why some players ended up getting snubbed and why, you know, some of the voting was super close. Mid lane support, I think even jungle as well was definitely close. So I definitely understand the different.
Do you think it's because they stopped getting so many kills in lane, like as simple as that? And it's like, okay, you're getting CS advantages, but people more attribute kills to a support. It's like, your support got the pick and then they got the kill, so the support did the job. But if you're just winning your lane and your team fighting, people are more like, that's the AD carry.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's that, but it's also the fall off in their dives. So much of it was them, you know, having all these successful dives and snowballing early off a lot of this pressure. And Huhi was pulling off those dives in bottom lane, as well as roaming up to some of the top lane ones in lock-in tournament and in the beginning of spring. And I think people didn't, you know, attribute as much credit for those early days, and it was a lot of team coordination. You know, they were scouted out, their jungle pathing would be seen earlier, so teams would be preparing for these dives, and those types of things went into it for the bottom side of the map as well.
I was about to hop in there, but then I realized we have 100 Thieves to talk about later on when we talk about the playoffs. True. So I'll just save my 100 Thief points till later.
Good, Mark.
I was explaining my and then I didn't know if anyone was like, wait a minute.
This is Mark's announcement of an announcement, by the way.
It was because I didn't know if Azael saw me do like a gasping point, and then I needed to like retro it and pull it out, you know? Like I undo my gasping point.
No one cares. No one cares.
As far as the rest of you know, our announcements and our global news coming up, LCS Proving Grounds Tournament is happening. It's pretty cool where you've got amateur teams coming in, you know, academy teams. We get this mix up that we were looking for. So many episodes of The Dive when we're talking about developing North American talent, and we're talking about crossover tournaments between these different levels. You know, definitely excited to see it. Happy to see it. I actually have a bunch of friends that are in the tournament because I have multiple friends that were on Solo Fide, rest in peace, the one that lost funding and stop paying their players. So they have been complaining very heavily. You know, the coach, Derek Zig, as well as Big T, former support in the LCS. Oh my God, Stitch is making an appearance. Forget about Proving Grounds. What up, Stitch?
He was hanging out. He was squeaking at me, so had to bring him up, say hi.
I'm getting cold-shouldered by my cats,
side are my pets go to? This side? Yeah, there we go.
Oh,
can you move him a little bit over?
All right, wait,
a little bit
way?
Closer.
Oh, he's wiggling.
Other side.
He's wiggling. He wants down.
Long way. Podcast listeners are going to be like, wait, now I have to go load up the video, see what's going on.
It's worth it. He's cute.
On the Proving Grounds thing, I'm super excited about it. The main tournament, so there's a last chance qualifier right now to get the final teams in there, which is going to be running this week. And the main tournament starts next week on the 29th. So you can catch a little bit of the action if you want a taster. But I'll definitely be watching next week because I think it's a really cool idea to be able to see kind of the closed system of the LCS opened up a little bit. It's one of the things that I did feel like you kind of lost a little bit with the removal of relegations and promotion system, was like seeing a group of 5 guys bring it together, a group of the friends, you know, with the dream. And I'm excited to see that come back a little bit, as well as the upsets, I feel like people are going to take it a little bit too far, but I'm excited to see the drama of like the academy team lost to these guys kind of thing. That's going to happen with the amateur teams. Overall, I actually think it'll be a lot of fun. And to Kobe's point, like good development to see a real competition where the goal for a lot of the amateur teams is winning and proving that they are this good. Whereas sometimes in academy, the goal is just improvement, and you don't necessarily see it always. In the same context.
I mean, I think it's great for the ecosystem because there is a direct comparison now between top amateur and academy, right? And I think that's actually really important to be able to then say, okay, well now amateur is truly a stepping stone towards pro, right? Whereas before it's like the best amateur teams just played the best amateur teams, and hopefully the teams were doing their due diligence and actually scouting them. Now you have an opportunity to actually prove yourself against these academy squads and say, hey,
Give me your
we
spot.
are as good. Exactly. Like
That's
we
what
are
you're
as good,
saying.
or we are better, or like, be able to actually show off your stuff and hopefully for them stand out. And I think that's really exciting because, not only for the individuals who maybe get that spot like Kobe's talking about, but for the future, because you then want to invest in and be a part of Academy if you're an up and coming player, and you can see, hey, I can do that by getting into amateur and rising through the ranks in amateur, and that's like more of a clear path to pro. It's an additional step in that path to pro. I think that they've been trying to build. Obviously, Scouting Grounds I think was helpful. Scouting Grounds was great. But I do think the addition of Proving Grounds and the new kind of amateur format, I think is going to do good things. Down the line, 5-10 years, you're hopefully going to be seeing a lot more players coming up through that route, and hopefully it improves the scouting of amateur players.
Let's go contracts. Rooting for my boy on EG Academy to make a resurgence and get back in. All right, let's move on to what you've been playing personally then, Azael. You're talking about path to pro. The first path is climbing that solo queue ladder, or climbing that normal game MMR first.
Climb that MMR.
Getting those flex queue games together, getting the clash team together. 11.6 has been really fun for me, especially. I always look at the jungle changes first, and they gave some experience back at Gromp, which was one that had dropped a little bit of importance because it was nerfed really hard previously. And I actually like it getting a little bit of love back, because when it is valuable, you visit it a lot because it also has the heal in it now, and it just made it feel a little bit nicer as far as all the previous hits on jungle.
You know what I don't like in 11.6 is I'm seeing a lot more Akali again, and I just hate that champion so much. Anytime Akali is meta, it doesn't matter what role I'm playing, that's my ban. I don't want that shit in my games. Get it out of there. It's
Fair
just
enough.
Oh my god, playing against Shroud is so frustrating, and I feel like the E does so much damage now. These Akalis running around with like Night Harvester or Lichbane, they just hit an E and you just die instantly. It is frightening now, man. The Shuriken flip damage is pretty crazy. They also changed the R to magic damage. So that's going to be additionally powerful with any pen that they're actually purchasing up. So I think Akali is going to be back in there for pro when we do eventually get to 11.6 and further on. But as far as what I've been doing a lot of, I've been playing a bit of Flex Q and playing a lot of Phil and stuff and normals and whatnot. And something I've been noticing is just Phil is now you actually just get jungle every game.
Like, I saw your tweet.
It's kind of crazy how unpopular it is. Yeah, and I did tweet about this last night because I was playing and I played like 4 or 5 games, and 4 or 5 games in a row I queued Phil by myself and got jungle. And I was thinking about it, I'm like, looking back through some of my match histories on some of my accounts, and I was just getting jungle like every time I'm queuing Phil by myself. It used to be that you played a lot of support and then kind of mishmash with the other roles, but it just feels like no one wants to jungle anymore. And I did tweet it out because I was really curious to hear people's takes on it and some people's thoughts. And most people were really actually referencing, there's a few things. Most of it was people flaming you, basically, the pressure from the team, like the negativity around jungle, like I'm losing my lane, but it's the jungler's fault because this guy could have ganked this lane. He's pushed up. He's at the tower. Who cares if he has 6 solo kills on me? It's the jungler's fault. There's that kind of thing. And then a lot of other people are talking about the fact that jungle there's less transferable skills between jungle and the other roles. And also the fact, Wiggly tweeted talking about
that's what I was about to mention.
How often it has changed. Right. And I think these are all combining to make the role really unpopular, where it's like, this is hard. Me being good at top lane doesn't really mean I understand jungle, but I could probably play mid, and there's so much pressure from your teammates to be performing, to be at the right place at the right time. Even if you are at the right place at the right time, your teammate who's dying on the other side of the map is probably pissed that you're not there instead. So it's kind of interesting, and I'm curious to hear some of your guys' thoughts on just the evolution of this role and why no one wants to play it anymore.
I mean, we actually, I believe we discussed this before when we were talking about how unpopular jungle was. And for me, the changes to jungle aren't as big of a deal as the mentality of the player base around jungle. and the flame that jungle gets.
Mhm.
I for me, that is the majority of it, because I actually enjoy theory crafting in all games, as one of my highest points for these games. I love big patch days. I love preseason. I love I actually like when jungle things change, because it really gets you thinking about why you are doing what you're doing. And that's why I became a jungler in the first place, was because there are so many options and so many choices of how to gather information for your team, with how you're going to spend your time getting vision, how you're going to clear your camps in order to get to an area on the map and be there in the right time, depending on the different lane matchups and all these variables. And so yes, when things change, like I miss unique smites on camps, when you could like smite the wolf camp and a little like ghosty wisp thing comes out or whatever, and it's like tracking things
only
around.
Smite chickens. What are you doing?
Yeah, there's all these
poison from the gromp.
things. You get poison, yeah. So I definitely I enjoyed that, and I could see why changing some people wouldn't like it. But for me, the number one thing is just the attitude that people have for junglers. Like especially because I started as a Riot account so early. I was like, I never type. Okay, I never type anything bad to anybody. I'm always just like hands off keyboard. Maybe I get to the point where I have to mute someone. Usually I don't even mute people though. But jungle really tests you on that, okay? And even me, I'm like, I'll never say anything first. As soon as somebody says, like, starts flaming my asshole, that's where it really tests you, because the rebuttal is where you really need to have some strength. You gotta say it back. Because I'm like, I'm not saying anything, and then they start flaming you, and you're just like.
You got to type it, but then you delete. Control A, delete. You type out all the hatred, so it comes out of you, and then you Control A, delete. Don't press enter.
Go
ahead.
You know what actually gets me the most when I'm jungling these days is when I'm on my first clear. I haven't even done my second buff yet, and my solo laners are dying solo, not getting level 2 ganked. They get solo killed, and I start getting pinged, and I'm just like. I just feel the rage building up inside me. I want to say something like, I couldn't even been there. It's 1 minute in the game. Your ass is already dead.
So imagine
I'm a
you're not a player like Kobe. You don't even enjoy the theory crafting. You don't enjoy that your role gets changed all the time. You don't want to stay up to date on the optimal clearings. You don't want to have to, not lane. You like laning. You like last hitting minions and slapping the other guy with your Q or something, and you don't get to do any of that. And now you throw that extra pressure on top of your back of your team hating you. I mean, Kobe likes the role, and even he gets frustrated, So, like, I think that's the main reason, It's that combination of all three, because, like, support really plays different, but, like, how often do people other than the AD carry flame the support, except maybe late game when they're like, where are the wards? Other than that, it's you have a 20-minute buffer before people start flaming you as a support.
It's also the other thing is like, okay, so multiple roles get flamed in League of Legends, right? People flame everybody, right? Yeah. But with jungle, it's often 4 versus 1, and it's like laners stick together, But there's no other jungler to have your back and be like, yo, stop flaming this guy. Yeah, he's having a bad game, or like, no, you're by yourself. Okay, so that's why I feel like junglers often develop these complex where they're like them versus the world, and they're like everyone's out to get them, because they are. Okay, your top laner starts flaming you. Guess what? The mid laner is going to back up your top laner and be like, yeah, this is a dumbass jungler.
Yeah, this idiot didn't gank me either.
Exactly. They're like, yeah, you know what? I haven't seen this idiot either. Even though
he missed a Q when he came to gank for me on Lee Sin. This guy sucks. Actually, this other person's kind of right.
Yeah,
screw this jungler.
I do feel like it that adds to it, where like there's this natural kind of grouping and gang of the laners versus the junglers too that adds on to it. Yeah. Psychology of a league of a league team is actually.
I will say the thing I do love most about jungle though, and why I've liked jungle for a long time is that you have more of an opportunity to pick your fights, right? Whereas like with top lane, the thing I like least about top lane, it's most exemplified there, is if you pick early and you get counterpicked and you're just locked in this unfun lane, like you are just trapped, right? Like you're just stuck there at the mercy of your team coming to bail you out a lot of times. Whereas jungle, I feel like, yes, there are some games where you're going to get constantly invaded, but it's pretty rare, I think, compared to how stuck you are, in some of these solo lanes. And and it allows you to have more of like where you're picking the right opportunities for yourself, which can be really fun. And I think jungle's strong. I think it's a good role, but I definitely see that the mental side and the kind of like development of jungle diff and all this type of talk has really, I think, pushed people away from the role.
Did you have one more thing you wanted to add, Mark? Because I was going to move on to.
No, I was about to ask, are we done with the jungle wine
okay,
hour?
Good, because I'm on the same page. I'm moving it back to actual patch notes changes that I've been using. This is a jungler, but I'm not going to talk about jungle at all, role at all with it. Xin Zhao with his changes. It is actually really cool, but is not, this big power difference where they actually put in some little damage nerfs along with allowing you to charge off of hitting your W now. The W long range part of your stab for your wind turns lightning, or is this a really weird name for the ability?
Wind becomes lightning?
Yeah, wind becomes lightning. Which is actually just one of the weirdest names. But anyway, they put a lot of damage into it previously with some of the buffs they did to Xin. And now if you hit someone, then it challenges them, so you can use your Audacious Charge, super long range to them. But one of the things that people haven't thought about, for jungling, which is the biggest buff to me, you can use this on the camps when you're going from camp to camp. And it insanely increases your clear speed, because like you can almost reach it from the other camp, and you're doubling at the beginning, and then you immediately charge in there, and your time spent traveling between camps is greatly reduced. And I think that's the win rate's going to increase a little bit slower because there are these different things, and the buff was really to a skill-based interaction. He didn't see, any sort of big jump in win rates, for solo queue right off the bat. But I think that when people start really maximizing, the clear speed with being able to jump to different camps and team fights where you can actually make use of, long range jumps into ultimates and stuff like that, it's definitely a good change, at least.
That's what I was about to ask. Is have you done any sick kind of like old Lee Sin escapes, where like you queue a camp and then you run away and then queue back to it? Do you ever like W a camp as you're running away and then E right back to it, try and get away from them?
The first thing I tried was trying to do, I thought you were going to talk about insecking as soon as you started talking about Lee Sin. The first thing I tried to do was a sick-ass insect where there's a team fight, and I try and W somebody that's by the AD carry, then charge to them, then flash and over, then ult. Which is a really ghetto, insect, because it's a lot more clunky with Xin Zhao. It takes way longer, and they see it coming. And guess what? It turns out that was a problem. And my first couple attempts at that were disastrous, but
gave up pretty quick.
I was able to get in there at least.
You can hit him with the R flash sometimes, knock him back in.
That's what I did. I did a W into E into R flash on him, but it takes so long. Since it's not instant. The AD carry just moved and moved off to the side, and it kind of bumped him over there. Thankfully, the ultimate actually does give you a long time of survivability in there, but you're kind of panicking, you're like, oh shit, now I'm surrounded.
One pick I think is actually really good right now that I haven't heard a lot of people talking about is Urgot. As far as top lane goes, I think Urgot with Titanic Hydra is actually really, really insane.
Was that the thing they just nerfed?
Yeah.
Oh, did it get nerfed? Oh, okay.
That was what the whole patch note was about.
Yeah, they dropped his on-hit effectiveness back down to 50% after buffing it.
I was going to say, because I'd been seeing that around a fair bit and seeing that pretty mega busted. So maybe it's not as strong. I think the win rate's still really high in 11-6, though. It honestly should still be a good build. Just Stridebreaker plus Titanic feels so strong. Stridebreaker on Urgot feels like it makes it such a joke to actually land your flip as well. And if you land the flip in lane, the damage plus the actual pretty long lasting stun makes it so easy to knock multiple passive procs on your shotgun knees and stuff off, and it feels really, really strong. It actually scales pretty well. I could see this pick making its way back into pro as people realize how good it is.
Yeah. The other two things I wanted to point out were the Volibear buffs to jungle specifically. They raised the cap on his E. You basically E now is like another freaking smite. It's so nutty. You can combo it with your smite to secure objectives really easily. It's it's just an insane amount of burst damage. Even top lane Volibears now, you can abuse this going in, stealing red buff from junglers. You basically have a smite fight there that's close to even terms compared to what it used to be. Considering
once you have a bunch of points in it, because level 1 it's still like 150, but I think it's at level 5 it's 750.
Yeah,
right?
there is AP Volibear is actually a decently popular build for top lane now too. I've been hit by a couple of those. It is ginormous. The other one I wanted to point out is Sylas for all the non-jungle mains. For solo laners, play Sylas. This champion, not only is it super fun, but with these extra buffs, I feel like he's just so insanely good. As long as you don't get blasted in the first like 5 levels, early levels, this champion is insanely powerful. They buffed again passive attack speed and Kingslayer. And every top lane friend that I have that plays Sylas just seems like every game that we play together just absolutely smashes with this champion. So I really think Sylas is going to come back in a big way. We already saw it in the LCS. That's pre 11.6 buffs.
Yeah. I think the thing that interested me most from these patch notes is a lot of some of the natural healing getting cut out of the game, which was, I think, something that fans of the game community has been complaining about quite a lot over the last, I don't know now, 3 years. So the nerfs to Ravenous Hunter, nerfs to Fleet Footwork, nerfs to just some of the lifesteal items in general. I was I was pretty happy to see some of those coming through. I'm a little sad the Immortal Shield Bow Lifeline active kind of got cut to be AD focus instead of lifesteal focus. I know that can be a frustrating gameplay experience when like you try and assassinate the person, they get their shield, and then they lifesteal off you. But I did like that more. Because I feel like the thing that really annoys me is like the passive, just like in lane constant healing, which makes things feel a little frustrating. So I was happy to ultimately see some of that get taken down. And Verdant Barrier and Seeker's Arm also got hit for their defensive value because they're both just such insane pickups if you ever were against double damage types from jungle in your laner. Mm-hmm. And I'm hoping that all this leads to more kills. That's what I'm hoping all this results in, at least for the pro play angle. But I think a lot of this addresses complaints that players had as well.
Yeah, I'm kind of split a little bit on the Verdant Barrier and Seeker's nerfs, because at the same time, I feel like assassins are getting pretty strong. And when you're playing mid against some of these assassins, it's like, it's so unfun getting one shot by a combo that they do where they don't even do it right. You know, it's like Zed just friggin' Rs to you and like misses his Q and then E-autos you and you die. It's like, it's just because he has Prowler's caught and zooming in. So I'm kind of split on it a bit, but I think for pro, for sure, you know, less defensive options just makes it a better viewing experience. Because like you say, more kills potentially, I think is more exciting. Lifesteal also, I think, is so dividing, because it feels so good when you're the one lifestealing through everything, and it feels so bad when it's being done to you. So overall, pretty good changes for the game. All right, let's talk about some LCS. Team Liquid and Cloud9, they moved on. Who's looking better? What do you think?
This is a tough one because I felt like the quality of their opponents were also pretty drastic as well. When you're trying to compare like who looked better. I'll probably say I was, at least compared to the regular season 4, more impressed with Team Liquid. I thought they looked really good. I think a lot of their players stepped up. They also showed a variety of play styles, you know, with like the 1-3-1 focus versus the team fight and whatnot. So I was pretty happy with how Team Liquid looked after all of us, you know, on the dive last episode. We're pretty worried, like, are they going to be able to pull it out? And I think they won. I mean, game 1 was a little coin flippy, but otherwise quite handily.
I think Team Liquid definitely looked better. I think tactical as well, as much as it's so fun to still keep making fun of him for these rocket jumps on Tristana. And
he's had some stinkers.
He did another one where into 3 people with exhaust available, and then he did another one mid lane and instantly had a flashback out, but only to bait in an extra kill onto Udyr, who tried to chase him down. I still, yes, those are happening, but I do think that it's getting like over memed and overblown from, you know, he was definitely slumping way harder in the middle of the season and the late stages of the season, when a lot of things people were criticizing him for weren't actually even just like, oh yeah, there's this like Malphite rocket jump, Tristana meme for him. He was legit like getting picked off all the time and had poor positioning in a lot of these team fights.
Yeah.
And so I think overall, his play improved, even though that Tristana game, he still had some very lively moments, we'll call them. Because Tristana is so powerful right now. I do always want Tristana players to be looking for those epic, jump in, get your reset, jump out before danger closes in on you plays. He had some that were not even close to working out though, so you don't get like half credit for any of those, especially like the 1v3 plus exhaust.
They were
one.
all full HP when you jumped in as well.
Exactly. So like, I want to be clear here. Like, as much as I love these, I want to see aggressive Tristana plays. You
want the aggressive ones. You don't want the suicidal ones.
Exactly. You're not getting like half credit for any of those. But overall for the team too. Sorry, go ahead, Mark.
Oh, I was just, that's why his Jin and Sivir are so good. No way to jump in. Those games were actually both really incredible for him. Actually, I thought he was really good in both those.
Yeah.
But no gap closers.
Yeah, I liked your tweet about the driver's ed teacher. CoreJJ is like the driver's ed teacher with the safety brake. He can just turn off the W on the Tristana so he can't jump in. Because I agree. I mean, he still had a couple bad moments, but I think overall he had a very strong series. It's unfortunate that the memorable moments, are kind of the suicide jump. But for what it's worth, I think he got a lot better compared to the regular season. So that I think spells good things for them. I think the fact that TL this is the first time I want to say ever since they started winning championships that they actually look like a flexible team. That's never happened before. They were always the really standard, go late, multiple tanks, frontline type style, like front to back, fight it out. There have been some varieties that have come out, here and there, but Alfari is a true split push, counterpick, carry threat. He can play tanks. Jensen now is playing all this different stuff, bringing out the Ahri. They're willing to bring out the TF. They're willing to bring out the Veigar. They have all these different picks that are kind of their style, and I think it's really exciting to see a team that is developing in that way. Of course, partially it is due to the change in top lane and the change in players, but also, Cold. I watched a little bit of Team Liquid content, and he was talking about the different players and player by player, and he was talking about Jensen and saying, hey, Jensen is a guy that can play all these picks and that is really talented, but has to be pushed to do it. And, he doesn't naturally want to go and try these different picks and try these different styles. He needs to be pushed to do it. And that's something that they're trying to do. He also touched on Tactical and said, hey, it's pretty obvious he's making a lot of mistakes, but I want him to stay aggressive. I don't want him to be this guy who's going to be passive and scared all the time. So I like that TL is kind of pushing for that development. And it really did feel like it showed against TSM. It was cool to see these different styles being brought out. A lot of times it wasn't just having to be about Alfari, just getting counterpick and slamming a lane. He could blind pick, he could play tanks, he could play whatever you want, and they could still have a lot of success.
Yeah, this is it's kind of renewed the hype from lock-in tournament, basically, because they certainly ran into a lot of problems in the early stages and mid stages of the spring split. But since spring split is so compact, you can kind of forget that was only a couple weeks. Like, that's just a few weeks. Teams have speed bumps. They're working stuff out. And for lock-in tournament, they had all just arrived. They barely just got Santorin in there. So I think people want to judge as quickly as possible off of every little bit of data that they get, but keep in mind that these teams are definitely evolving and they're peaking at the right time now. So it looks really good for them with winning here, being in the top of the winners bracket. They have a really, really good chance. Meanwhile, on the side of Cloud9, if we're talking about players that people were worried about before, maybe, and then showed up and shut them all up, it's Fudge delivering the KO to a lot of the haters. I feel like that there was some really funny back and forth on social media from a bunch of different angles, but he had a really good series for Cloud9, specifically versus Someday in so many of these matchups, and it wasn't even about some of the individual 1v1 performances. His set game with a lot of the team play that he was getting off Stridebreaker plays into ultimates and being like the lone front person for that team comp in a very pivotal role. It's some individual plays, it's team play, how he's working into the entire strategy. I feel like I also feel a lot more confident about Cloud9 now, even though there's definitely still some things to nitpick about the series. Overall, I was definitely happy with the progression that we have seen from both teams and what they're able to display in a full best of 5 now that we actually get to have a bigger set of data.
Yeah, I never felt like C9 was going to lose that series, though there were definitely moments where it's like, oh, they lost to Baron, or oh, they lost to Baron again, and some of their like, oh, this is soul point.
Did you see all of them popping off on afterwards of how Blabber made the call? There's no smite on Udyr, just finish Baron.
Oh, I did not see that.
all of them reference it. Perks in his interview afterwards specifically is like, yeah, and then Blabber says there's no smite on this Udyr, finish Baron. Boom, he pops over. Oh, what the hell?
I mean, on the one hand, that's almost like, at least, okay, it's not good, but it's a better justification than just like deciding to 50-50 a Baron. I'd rather hear that than like, oh, we just thought that this was a fine play.
Oh, we
and
just
then it didn't go well.
50-50'd it while we were in full control of the game for no reason.
Yeah, I'd rather hear a mistimer than that.
And the enemy team had a jinx too, and that rocket exploded very close to the Baron as well. So I think there were multiple things that were still a little risky about that.
Yeah, for sure. And like, I mean, some of their team fights weren't super clean. They got picked off sometimes. Like we said as well, like, or the Drakes, they risked a couple times where it got to Elder point when they weren't super clean about controlling them in, like, I think it was game 2, maybe it's game 1. But like, all that stuff aside, I never really felt like 100 Thieves was in a threat to win the series, even if they stole one of the games off this kind of objective play.
Mm-hmm. I mean, honestly, that Dragon game that you're referring to was mostly off of Fudge getting caught bot lane right before the 3rd Dragon, because they gave up the first 2. They increased their gold lead to a point where they're like, they should have been able to win the 5v5, and then Fudge pushed way out bot lane with no tier 1 tower and just died right as Dragon was spawning. So it's like, oh, well, now they have 3 dragons, and now it's kind of dicey.
Yeah.
But I think overall, Cloud9 played really well. The 2 Barons were bad, and didn't really have any justification for going for them. I didn't know about the smite timer thing. I think it's kind of troll to think that you have both charges of smite timed, right? Like that's kind of what gets.
It's that
you said he had no smite.
Oh, that's my bad then.
Okay. So it was that he had no flash and couldn't get in. Okay, that makes more sense. Okay, because trying to time both charges of smite is like
I was like,
he could be in fog.
That's definitely my that's definitely my bad then.
Okay, that makes more sense. That makes more sense to me.
Okay, now I'm understanding your guys' confused looks on your faces too.
Yeah. I'm like, who is thinking that they see one smite and the guy doesn't have another charge? Like, that is some crazy stuff.
Come on, you're a jungler now, Azael. You gotta be on these things.
I mean, he's smiting me for a slow, and he's
I would be impressed if you're timing it
head.
both. You see it on ward, right? Like, you see this guy on ward smite Raptors, and then come into a fight and smite again, and then you rush Baron off that. All right, I'm impressed. But anyway,
freaking Phil jungler over here just
this guy just outed himself as not perfectly timing both charges of smite at all times. Yikes! Embarrassing. All right, my bad, guys. But yeah, the Barons were highly suspect. I will say that both like the 2 Barons that they lost were really bad. Didn't really have any reason to force them, but they were in control the whole game. They seem better than 100 Thieves, literally in every role and in every way, right? Like, this did not feel like a close series to me. They played really, really well, I think, overall. But when your mistakes are Baron mistakes, they are very costly and make the games appear much closer than they otherwise would have been, right? And that is a big deal. And that's why teams put a lot of effort into their Baron takes and their Baron turns and how they're actually doing this. Part of the problems, I think, were situations where, the jungler is around and they're going for these turns, but then they let it get too low before they turn. Maybe that was the situation where they thought that there was no flash and they couldn't get in, so it didn't matter if it got low. But I would have liked to see Cloud9 close those games out more cleanly because it felt so dominant. But I will say it was cool to see some different styles. It was cool to see Fudge playing well in the set where he had counterpick and kind of slapping around Cho'Gath. It was cool to see him playing well on the Sion game where he was getting constantly attacked and jungle pressured nonstop and still was worth a lot more than somebody on the Aatrox, and that was good. I have a little bit of concern about some of the drafting stuff from C9. I thought their last game draft was not good. The Ezreal Tristana set game where they're basically pure physical with, I think it was like Moonstone Lilia was their only AP. To me that was not a good draft, and that was one where I'm casting that game and I'm thinking you just have to be way better than your opponent to win this one, and they were, to their credit. They played it better. They got this big fight on 100 Thieves where 100 Thieves basically overchased with 3 people and all of 5 Cloud9 were around and killed them all and took the Baron, and then the game was over, right? And that's kind of how that one ended. But I think if you play that kind of a draft, that kind of a game against TL, you probably won't get away with it. Now, maybe I have a misread on that, but to me, I just don't like those kind of compositions. And even the fact that, Perkz had an incredible series. I think especially the Yone game and the Orianna were both great. Like, he was hitting so many shockwaves without setup. He was finding so many engages and plays with the Yone, which was incredible. The Tristana game, leaving the Syndra up was concerning because that matchup just seems really hard. And so they put him in a difficult situation. And I think, that in addition to the compositional issues against a better team probably would have been a loss.
I thought that ban was super random when they went to Lucian, and then I forgot what their second ban was, but they didn't do the Syndra. And then, right away, it was a top lane ban, but then they saved their top pick for last anyways, and it felt kind of weird to me because it's like, why not ban the matchup that everyone knows
or something?
Yeah, it was like Gnar, and I was like, can't you just counterpick the Gnar if you really want to, or take it early or something, and then ban the Syndra to give your mid lane a good matchup? But it's kind of probably one of those things where Perkz is like, yeah, I don't care, I'll play whatever matchup and I'll be fine, which is true. And the comp itself was interesting when the set went Blade of the Rune King, because I was like, ooh, maybe they're going like a 1-3-1 comp, and the Tristana and Set sit in side lanes and kind of more peel you apart. But then that felt weird with Moonstaff Lilia, because it's like, wait, don't you want to group with the double Moonstaff kind of thing? And I don't know. It was one of those drafts where I felt like maybe there's a world where they have to play it more split push oriented, and they could have.
They kind of tried, but then they kept getting caught, right?
Yeah, I mean, Perkz did not have his best game on Tristana. He talked about how in his interview where he was like, "Oh, I was tilted. I built Gale Force when I should have built Kraken Slayer, and then I was getting caught and all this stuff." So like, I don't think it was a great game, but they were also so far ahead of their opponents that like I didn't see that they had to use their comp in the way that like maybe it should have been played. And so that's why I think it was a weird series, because it was really boring, if I'm being honest. Like, it just felt like C9 were going to win no matter what they did in a lot of ways.
Well,
there's no tension.
For the point of like how they're supposed to use this, it's definitely valid to use your long range poke advantage with an early lead to set up at the objective first, and then Set is a great last pick into a team that has Cho'Gath, because if you get there first and you're sitting up on it and you have Ezreal and Karma and you're throwing out this poke, and then boom, Set finds it. All you have to have is that one angle to jump this big old health pool of a Cho'Gath into anybody that he hits on the back line, and both of them are low mobility carries, so Tom Kench can only eat one of them. Like that, I thought that was really intelligent, like adaptation. Towards the end, I think that is actually the best possible last pick for that comp, given what we had shaken out to early on, because Set can win both in the 1v1 for split pushing with the Blade of the Rune King and have tremendous impact for the team fight. So I definitely like I like some of the angles that they're going for, but let's set up the new matches. Okay, we got to keep it rolling here. Number one is gonna be EG versus TSM. And I immediately look at mid laners when I look at this matchup, because Power of Evil, it has done so much of the carry work for TSM. And I have so much confidence built up in him over this split with how TSM are playing. Meanwhile, Jizuke, to me, has always been, I'm always thinking about best of fives. When are people going to focus on, two champions that mainly stand out for him, for me, are Echo and Rise. When I see him pick these champions, I'm just so happy. I'm so excited. I'm looking for, the cleanest Jizuke play. I feel like with those two champions, you don't have the moments that people always like make fun of coin flipping Jizuke memes and stuff for. And no matter what the meta is, like not very many other people, even have a single Echo game. And yet he's playing it so often into these control mates matchups, and has had so much success with it. And you see the difference in his split pushing. Like this man, Echo split push creates so much pressure. He even can then find flanks. He can get out of all these situations when people collapse on him. But if you remember back to last year, then he's like split pushing on Kog'Maw. It's like you're like you gotta adapt to like the difference there. It's just such a different champion, and not gonna have that same effect. He has had, I'd say, decent success on the standard meta champs, right? It hasn't only been, it's not like he's pigeonholed himself into only playing these unique ones that I basically have gold stars on him for these champions. Like those are the ones in the champ select that I have highlighted. But it's not going to really matter. Like if you have Jizuke Azir versus PoE Azir, you ask anybody, they're going to take the PoE Azir every single time, right?
Yeah. I think it's a matchup that I would expect TSM to be favored in, but I don't think it's without ways that EG can win it. Kind of with some of those picks, the big thing is the playstyle, the 1-3-1, which we saw TL use against TSM in their previous series. And I could see a world where, EG does go more to the Rise and the Echo, and they do this 1-3-1 style. We had Peter Dunn on Hotline League last week, and he was talking about like how he likes that they have a week to watch their other team's games and then prep specifically to be like, hey, I see what the other team did to beat this team, and now I can try and spend a week scrimming and see if we can replicate those results. So I can see a world where they do focus their drafts more on impact, playing a little bit more aggressive champion pool. Same with Jizuke, and then trying to do that, because that's also how they beat them in week 6 when they last matched up, was this Echo pick that just tore them apart. And Jizuke is really good at the 1-3-1. Arguably, I mean, now with perks here, probably not, but like one of the best 1-3-1 mid laners in the entire league.
I will say that TSM's series versus Team Liquid, with them coming out of the gates straight up in game number 1 with a strong early game and getting this early game gold lead with First Blood, getting early Rift Herald as well. I thought that also, we're talking about progression for teams and some of the assumptions that people have built up over spring. Coming into this, I think that TSM have definitely been working and focusing a lot on the early game as well, and it showed. So this matchup, I don't expect to go similar to some of our earlier spring matchups that we've had for this team. I also have been just laughing because PoE in some of his interviews is referencing their early season. And he's talking about their communication just being wild, just full of everybody just chattering, all kinds of random stuff, and everyone's confused and they have no idea what's going on. And I'm just like, holy moly, like that's how it was, because I guess now it makes sense of what people are seeing on screen with a lot of these, early game plays and some of the decision making where they're just like, he was like, nobody knows what's going on. Everybody's talking at the same time. Everybody has all this information that they're, it's like excessive information overload, I guess, in the communication. So I was glad to hear that, that has been cleaned up as well.
Yeah, for me, looking at it from the TSM side, it's kind of interesting. I still feel like they're favored, but I felt like some of their drafts were real stinkers against TL, which kind of set them up for failure in those games. And it was kind of hit or miss. I mean, game 4 to me was like really just didn't make sense. Like when they pick their Gragas, and TL has already picked their entire top side and has TF and R showing, and you already have Seraphine mid. And then you go Gragas, and it's like, Well, now you have literally no way to answer side lanes ever.
Oh, then he built AP Gragas.
Yeah, and then he did AP, which made even less sense. If he could have just gone tank to play weak side, then it would have made more sense. But I really felt like the fact that you saw that they're clearly going to be going for 1-3-1 with TF and Gnar, and you didn't pick any ability whatsoever to answer a side lane from any pick. So like that to me was so weird that it was like, of course TL are going to win that game. Like, what's your plan here, right? Like, unless you absolutely dominate them in the early game and just like force them to show up to every objective and then slam them or something. But the early game went bad for them too. So that was questionable to me. I felt like the Lucian Rumble game also didn't really make any sense. That draft felt pretty weird in game 2, where they went for Lucian, Aphelios, Rumble. They didn't really have a lot of really good like setup or lockdown, kind of for this Rumble, it felt like. And it didn't really feel like there was much of a plan other than just like, I don't know, like hope you win early. But I feel like GP is actually a pretty strong matchup into the Rumble, so that didn't seem like it was going to go particularly well for them, and it didn't. Of course, Santorin had an absolute pop-off game, and Jensen, that was his R game. He played really well. So like, yes, there are ways that TSM could have won, but those 2 games in particular to me felt like TL was really, really, really favored after draft, especially game 4. And you talk about the ability of EG to split push and the ability of them to try to play those sort of styles. If we're seeing a lot of those Seraphine comps from TSM, I could easily see the answer from EG just being, okay, well, we're just never going to 5v5. We're just going to split push you to death, right? And I think that can be really effective against those style of comps, as long as you don't get run over early, as long as you can grab a couple neutral objectives to delay the potential soul coming in.
So let me try and like offer maybe what they were looking for from the TSM side with this comp. So to offer
in the game 4 one.
Yeah, to offer another perspective.
I mean, they were looking for 5v5, right? Like that's obvious.
Yeah, but like, so when you versus split push, you always need really good hard engage, and you're going to need some way to get control of the game early. Because if the split push comp gets control of the game early and you lose too much territory, then you're just going to get run over. So with the Nautilus, with the Gragas, obviously they're trying to have these frontliners with point and click long range for Nautilus to try and secure somebody, and then Gragas with flash, body slam, and ultimate, trying to force the fight on the group that is not split away from them, so you can try and force at these objectives. But one of the critical points is also gaining control early, so that the split push team isn't able to get that far on the map before you can stack up things that can force them, can force their hand, like Dragon Soul and stuff like that. And they tried with the Olaf as well. Olaf can try and have that early pressure, but they weren't able to get anything before Twisted Fate gets level 6. And with the top side focus, I think Team Liquid drafted it really well on their side. Deserve credit, as well as playing out the early stages super well to set themselves up for, like, this is godlike split push comp. When you used to have Dream scenario, you're like, oh, let's have a Sivir to be able to rotate mid and just infinitely wave clear to set up both of our Twisted Fate and our Gnar side lane here. Let's actually camp and attack the Gragas early to get the Gnar ahead, so the Gnar is a super powerful split pusher along with the Twisted Fate. And so I think it was really well planned and executed from the Team Liquid side as well. And you can see that TSM, I feel like, yeah, they did make an early mistake there in draft and tried to come up with a solution, at least.
Mm-hmm. It's just, to me, it's like there were more obvious solutions. Like they just played the Camille in the previous game, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that worked well for having an actual split push answer. Aurelia was up, and Gnar was picked, right? To me, that's like a little bit disappointing when the counter pick is available and you have this player that's willing to play aggressive. I also think there's lots of other split push options if you don't want to go towards
actually,
that.
In that champ select on live when casting it, I brought up the Aurelia before they were about to pick, and then when the Twisted Fate covered it, it actually makes it really hard to play Aurelia into Gnar counter matchup on top side if you're facing it into a Twisted Fate. And yes, they do have Olaf into Udyr, but Seraphine isn't able to cover Twisted Fate like so many other champions. So
and they were worried about not having AP too, right? Like there's a lot of issues there because they had Seraphine as their only AP. So I think they're like, oh well, we need AP Gragas then to get some more magic damage. But still, I just think there was a lot of problems with that draft.
Yeah. I think looking back at EG though, it's an interesting matchup because I don't feel like there's big skill discrepancies in a lot of the positions. Whereas, in some of the other times you're like, oh well, Alfari is the best top in the league, hands down, going to be probably a constant advantage or something like that. Here, I don't feel that way, but I do think that the inconsistencies of EG as a whole is a big issue for them over a full 5-game series, and I think a lot of people instinctively look at Jizuke, but I actually think Sven's been the biggest offender of just like question mark ping decision making with his Mundo game, some of his invades, his Hecarim game where he was fighting the Skarner on a Spire. Like, there's so many of those things where I'm like, in a series, like if you do that, like, man, you're just like punting a game away. And I think that those kinds of concerns are the big thing that TSM has in their back pocket. Is I don't have those concerns really about any of their plays aside from maybe Huni.
You just reminded me also, because something, I forget what week it was, but like maybe a week ago or 2 weeks ago, I keep seeing this same play from EG where you can like see some of the internal communication on the map with the way that they're moving, and the team is like all around Baron except for Definitely in bottom lane, and they're like forcing really hard, and then you see Definitely like start to come up. It's like, oh, it's like he's like, no guys, I'm not coming, and the rest of the team is like, we're going in. And he's like, oh shit, well, okay, I guess I am. But you have this like this tug of war at these Rift Herald plays for several EG Rift Herald plays. It wasn't just one. Where and I really think that has to get ironed out as well. You're talking about inconsistencies and stuff, and I think it's these multiple different things, right? Where, okay, so you have the one game where it's like back-to-back tower diving Lucian. Okay, whatever. That thing happens. And you have one of this where it's like, oh, okay, we had really bad, coordination on Rift Herald. We weren't decided if we were going to have the whole team head up there or we're going to keep split pushing, try and get, turret plates by hand or whatever. But yeah, I definitely think the coordination as well in some of these moments is definitely key for them.
Yeah, it's going to be a really exciting series. I feel like, to my mind, I'm giving TSM the edge because I just think that they are a more consistent team. But would I be shocked if EG upset them? No, because I think that if EG actually plays their best games, they can beat anyone, right? And they actually stomped TSM in the last weekend of the split, right? Like they actually had a really strong game where Impact was popping off on the Aatrox and Jizuke was popping off on the Echo, and that game was really, really dominant. But because of a lot of the issues that you guys are mentioning, and especially because it's not just one thing, it feels really hard to eliminate all of that, right? If it's just one guy who's sometimes kind of like having these moments where it's like, then you can maybe get away with it, or you can maybe work on it and eliminate it. It feels really hard when it's a lot of different people, when it's, Svenskeren might have a game that's just going to cost you the game off these crazy invades, or maybe the team coordination is going to cost you a game off of like a silly Rift Herald or a Baron where it's split calls, or Shizuke is going to have one. Like their highs are very, very high, but they have really never, for the entire time since they've been back in the league, been able to shake this kind of stereotype about them where they are a little bit coin flippy, right? You just don't know what you're going to get from EG. They have some of the best, most exciting games of any team in the split, but then they can really turn in some stinkers, and I think that hurts you so much in a best of 5.
All right, let's move on to the other best of 5 then.
Predictions?
Oh, yeah, let's do
TSM 3-1.
You're always trying to dodge them. Get in there, Kobe.
3-1. TSM.
3-1? Okay. Yeah, I guess that's pretty boring. We're all going to say 3-1, aren't we? I'm regretting my decision here. Moving on. Kobe had it right.
All righty. Coming hot off the loss to Cloud9 for 100 Thieves. We haven't seen Dignitas in, it feels like quite a while. Anytime we have these best of 5s, front loaded with these teams, it does feel like it's been a while since we've seen EG. Our EG, what's going to be new? What have they been working on? Same thing I feel like for Dignitas, especially as as Dig have had so many games throughout Spring Split that were really down in the mud, is getting into some weird objective trades later on into the game, or it's like a Nexus defense. To your earlier point with the Afromu, bringing up the pulverized flash play from him, and then they run it back and they're like, you know what? Boom, got another dub on the board. Count it for Dig. Let's go. I feel like this one is going to be exciting.
Yeah, I think this will be a pretty back and forth series. I can see how the matchups. I feel like I can see how they're going to go. Where it's like, okay, 100 Thieves bot lane is going to usually be winning in like CS and pressure and this kind of stuff, but Afro's going to make plays and he's going to kill them, and like Dardoch's going to do some whack stuff, and Closer's going to maybe punish some of that, but then Dardoch will make these bigger plays here, and like, I can see it really going back and forth. So I'm super excited about this one, but it's hard to balance like that with how bad and sad I feel after watching the 100 Thieves series from this weekend. Because I felt like they looked really, really just uncoordinated, and it was almost like a little painful to see some of those games.
Yeah, which is like, I don't know if I'm getting baited into thinking it, but I was watching that and I was like, "Ooh, 100 Thieves, you're not looking good. Is Dignitas favored here?" And
yeah,
I don't know,
I was like,
that's kind of how I'm feeling, right? But I don't know if I'm getting baited into it. 100 Thieves did 2-0 them in the regular season. Both were with Demonte, though. Is Demonte going to come in? That's another question. I wouldn't have been surprised if when they were down 2-0 in their series against Cloud9, they subbed him in. But they didn't do it then. We don't know if they're going to do it coming into this next week, or if they're just going to stick with Ryoma. I don't think that Ryoma played bad. I really don't want people to just be pinning on him. And I did tweet about this because I just feel like I saw immediately so much like Ryoma Flame on social, just for people being like, oh my God, this guy's so terrible. I thought he played fine. The problems are much larger than just Ryoma. Everyone was not playing very well. They were not playing very coordinated, and I feel like 100 Thieves has a complete lack of identity or urgency in the game, where it feels like, from what they showed us, their game plan was basically sit around and hope you win 5v5. Right? That's about it. That's what you got, right? And it's like, yeah, you got some good players. You got a great bot lane. Somebody's a good team fighter. FBI is maybe the best team fighting bot laner in the league. Like, that is really good. But when you're playing against top level teams and you allow them to dictate the pace of the entire early game, it's really hard to find yourself in a winning position, or even an even position, when you are ready to team fight, when you want to really go for it, right? And it doesn't feel like Closer's doing anything early. Ryoma's sure not doing anything early. They are a very, very, very passive team, and that is concerning for them. So, I have a lot of concerns about 100 Thieves, but Dignitas is not this super clean, consistent team week in, week out either. They definitely turn in some silly games, and even just thinking back to the first time they played, that was like the Rengar game from Dardoch, that really did not work out at all. Like, they got super stomped by 100 Thieves. Of course, 100 Thieves was kind of playing better at that time, and like I said, it was Demonte, so it is very different. But Dignitas, I think, have been improving over the split. It feels like these teams have kind of had a bit of an opposite trajectory. And I'm really kind of excited for it as a result, to see like how close is this going to be. Dignitas is going to be hard to prep for. They've shown so many different styles. Dardoch has shown a million different champions, and maybe they can get an edge in draft as a result.
So I wanted to jump in on the 100 Thieves part, because I was doing reviews specifically of game 2. And this is the game where they pick someday the Aatrox into Sion matchup on top side, which is super good for Aatrox. And they have Azir and Jinx, really good scaling for your team fight, long range, high DPS for later in the game. They combine the Jinx with the Thresh. And what happens in the early game is that Closer's actually very active, but you can see all of their focus for their pre-game plan for 100 Thieves was to say, okay, go up to top side, play around this Aatrox versus Sion matchup. And there are like 4 Closer ganks up to the top side of the map, and this Aatrox has a 10 CS lead by like almost 15 minutes. And they do have a bit of pressure. And by the way, this is without even getting the Rift Herald. This is, okay, you got a 10 CS lead up there on your Aatrox, But not only did Blabber on the Olaf soak up a mid wave and then bully down this dragon on a really quick dragon timing, but then he also was able to get Rift Herald while Closer was going for another top gank. If you go back to this play, Closer blast cones over and runs straight up for this top gank through a tri-brush. And they do burn Fudge's flash for the Scion, but it's just a Scion's flash. And Olaf here, Blabber, is just down in the Rift Herald Cove, finishes up the Rift Herald, grabs this off top side. So there's not even that big chunk of gold that you get as a reward out of your top side play. If you're focusing on Aatrox into Scion matchup, Aatrox can, sustain leech off him no matter what. He will have control of this lane, and you're going up and ganking all of your ganks up there as well. Then man, you really need to cash in with the Rift Herald, because 10 CS is not going to cut it. Okay, that is an early game plan, and that is a lot of early game action actually, where he goes up there a bunch of times and they gank it a bunch, but the rewards are just not there. And then you're into this thing where you're like, okay, I guess we got to rely on the Azir Jinx for later for these team fights. But Cloud9, they keep up on this dragon timer. Blabber's there on spawn basically, and it is one of the earliest souls. In the LCS, they have Infernal Soul coming online so quickly there. It was just like they did actually have a plan, and they did do some early game stuff, but it did not. They did not get any rewards from it.
I mean, yeah, part of it was like the actual steps of that plan were not all great steps. Like the first dive on top was great, but then they repeat ganked it into a pushing wave after they blew their TP from their mid laner to get top. And then they're ganking top again with this fat wave, and it's like, well, the other mid laner has TP too, guys. Like, how'd you forget about that? And then Closer dies. It's still a 1-for-1, but like you're kind of neutralizing some of the advantages. And like you said, this whole time Olaf is soaking bot wave. And then after that, I don't think they even turned another kill top, unless I'm mistaken.
They dived or they ganked again, but they would only get like flash out of Fudge, or like he drops a few CS. But Fudge, honestly, to only be down 10 CS, for that period of the game, he grabs his Bramble Vest early, hugs onto that, soaks up the CS. He's
Scion.
He's doing just fine up there.
He's literally the best champ if you're gonna die under turret on wave on level 3 wave, because you just come back up and you just go wham 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 wham, and you don't even fall behind. Like the other guy's 300 gold richer, but you yourself are not actually behind the pace of the game necessarily. And then when the other gank goes bad, it's like, I don't know. It was definitely like not a clean execution of a game plan, though they clearly had one. And then their team fights weren't great. Like there was the half-hearted flank attempt by Someday, like on the third dragon, which was when they got 4-for-1 or whatever that team fight was, or maybe it was 3-for-2, I forget. But it was like he hopped the wall, sent a chain at the Scion, threw out his max range first Q, and then kind of just bailed and walked over an Ori ball. And it was like, is this really the team fight, you guys? Is this what you wanted to do?
One other tiny, small little thing is that with the Jinx Thresh bottom side lock-in, that is actually a pretty good and easy combo to pull off if you get the hook or flay people onto traps. But it seemed like they hadn't practiced that too often or something, because FPL kept throwing out these traps and rarely ever got them into a spot where it was, is being pulled into the trap or flayed in or off or something like that. That was just one really small micro thing that I noticed. As far as the individual, champion choices too that went into this, didn't seem like they had a ton of coordination or practice in on that one either.
Yeah. I mean, all this is to say as well that, like, to Zale's point, Ryoma got a ton of the flame because a lot of people were like, well, you could have just kept Demonte in, and there was it's somewhat of a question more of the management decision to put Ryoma in than actual criticism at Ryoma. But that was the bulk of the conversation was centered around that. It felt like in the post-game thread that I saw. But with all the issues that we're highlighting, obviously it is a whole team issue that like is totally independent.
Yeah, I think that's it's easier to latch onto when you're like, something needs to change.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
The other thing that I think people kind of forget is that they had stopped playing their aggressive playstyle even with Demonte. It felt like they moved away from that, right? So this is clearly a team issue or a coaching issue or whatever. They only played 3 games total in the regular season with Demonte of TF plus Galio, like total. It was 2 TF games and 1 Galio game, right? That's it. So it's not as though that they were just like spamming out those games, during the regular season. It did start getting banned some against them, But then it actually stopped getting banned against them, and they just continued to play control mages with Damonte. So clearly that's what they wanted to do. And then they subbed out Ryoma. They kept playing control mages, so clearly that's what they wanted to do. For whatever reason, whether it stopped working in scrims or they just determined that they felt it wasn't a good way to play the game. That is more of what I kind of have the problem with is there like abandonment of that play style that felt like it was really good instead of further exploring it. But I'm actually really excited for this this match. I think I'm getting baited, but I'm predicting Dignitas. It's a series where I don't feel super confident in this, but I think Dignitas can do it. I think that 100 Thieves has been on a downward spiral. I think they look really bad against Cloud9. They don't seem to have a clear game plan or idea of how they want to play the game, and I do think Dignitas has that. Whether or not Dignitas is consistent enough and brings the level of performance at a high enough level to actually take down 100 Thieves in a best of 5 is another story, but I feel they can do it. I'm going to go 3-2 Dig.
Yeah, I want to push a little bit on why you think Dig is going to do it, because we talked the whole time about 100 Thieves in this matchup. Haven't touched
I
too
actually
heavily
think
on
that
Dig.
I think that Fake God and Sligo are actually playing at a very high level. I think that this team has actually developed really really well. I think that Afro and Neo are playing at a similar level to what we're actually getting out of FBI and Huhi. The individual pieces on Dignitas are actually really good right now. And I feel that Dignitas is a more proactive team in the early game. They get a lot more action out of Afro as well as Dardoch. If Dardoch is passive in the early game, that's where I more have problems with how Dignitas is playing, because I do think that when Dardoch is inactive, the team can kind of fall back into similar things that we're criticizing 100 Thieves for, where they do actually start to look pretty passive and don't have as clear of a game plan. But this team feels more flexible. This team feels like on a role by role basis, they're actually matching up pretty well. As funny as that sounds to say, in some of these cases, because they're lesser known players, I think that the Dignitas players are actually playing really well. And the fact that they have, an incredible amount of flexibility, especially with Dardoch, like they can play all these different picks. They team fight really, really well. Team fighting is what it feels like 100 Thieves wants to do. But Dignitas, I actually think their 5v5 is their biggest strength. I think that they coordinate really well in the 5v5s. Even if they have errors and get put behind early, their 5v5s are so good. And it doesn't feel like 100 Thieves is a team that is going to push you and run over you in the early game, at least not from what we saw against Cloud9. Of course, they're a different beast. But if they come into this series and play this kind of slow, 5v5 style, I think Dignitas has the ability to get stuff done early and potentially get big leads with Dardoch and Afro. And I think even if they don't do that, I think they can 5v5 just as well or better.
Here's something I was going to say for Dignitas. I think they have actually been benefiting from having their internal structure be the two dedicated leadership senior members, basically, of Dardoch and Aframu, and then the very tenacious, kind of second seat for the rest of the younger players or the rest of the unproven, LCS players, because you hear them talking in all of their interviews, and Neo and Fake God and all these guys are talking about how much Aframu and Dardoch are doing for them in leadership and in teaching them and in coordinating how they want to play. And I feel like in game that really shows up in clear in-game leadership, where you're mentioning, Dardoch being proactive and stuff. They have, from the very word go, they have been playing around Dardoch. Like, they had 5-person defense invades. They have been very coordinated on playing around jungle early, and Aframu doing a lot of this shot calling for team fights and objectives and coordinating them for late game. It's always one of the harder things to touch on, in-game comms, because we don't get to listen to all these games that they play. But from the outside looking in, and the little bits of info we get from interviews and stuff like that, it does feel like that has focused this team, as far as their win condition and where they want to go within the game. So I think that's one of the big things that has led to some of Dignitas' success in spring, is that kind of chain of command, I would say.
So you're predicting them to win?
I am not. I am predicting 100 Thieves, because I really think that a lot of this, and we had a large block of like, kind of negative view of 100 Thieves because of the fall off in the split, and then also playing against Cloud9 in the best of 5. I honestly think that Cloud9 is the worst possible matchup for 100 Thieves, and I think that Closer, some of these like mistakes he's making in this series, like there were definitely, it feels like he's not as confident in his early game plan, not as confident in laying out what they want to do as jungle, because like we're saying in game number 2, this full top side focus with ignoring the Rift Herald and just spamming ganks is like got a list in game. It was like gank for Aatrox. And then question mark after that.
Step one.
Right?
Yeah.
But then what do you remember which game it was where he was going for the invade on Gromp with bottom lane completely pushed up
horrible.
and they just collapsed on him for that one? I'm like, where's the communication at all? Where is the coordination there? Like, at least stop doing the Gromp and turn around and try and pincer your opponent bottom lane and come up with your bottom lane who's trailing. Maybe you can have a few seconds of a 3v2 that way, or you could get out or something. But those types of things I feel like happen so frequently for 100 Thieves versus Cloud9. And I don't think they will versus Dignitas. I think 100 Thieves will be much more confident and then not have this mental block. That being said, I still think it's going to be close. I think this is a banger, and I do have a lot of faith in Dignitas to make this a 5-game series, because like we're saying for Spring Split, they had so many wins where you're like, they are not winning this game, and then they come back and they win that team fight or they steal that objective, and they do. So I think I am going to go 100 Thieves, but I am only going to give 3-2.
Yeah, I think Dignitas is really tenacious. I think you said that when you were talking before. Like, they're not a team that's ever really out of the game, even when kind of far behind or looks like a losing game state. And I think that's really important in a 5-game series to if they're able to keep that mentality up. Whereas 100 Thieves, I don't know, they have a glass jaw, or they slumping down and things start going wrong, they don't feel as good. Because I definitely feel like when you watch their games and they fall out of it, it's kind of like this waiting to die feeling a little bit, which definitely is sad. And there's so many negative things to say about 100 Thieves that it's almost like, why am I predicting them to win? But I still think that they have some just substantial advantages that are going to be hard to overcome. I kind of talked about how I assume FBI and Huhi will probably be winning the majority of their laning phases. Afro and Neo, while they do convert a number of kills and they're really good at their coordination, they usually are sitting further back in lane. They're usually not contesting quite as hard unless it's a gank, and they do coordinate ganks well. But I think it'll put pressure on Dardoch to probably naturally be losing both side lanes. I think Fake God's really good, and I don't mean losing he's getting solo killed and hard dumpstered, but probably playing weak side. And we talked about it on the countdown, I think, a little bit, but it's I don't know why someday spam picks Renekton, but they actually have the lowest jungle proximity around it. It's a really weird thing, but they tend to do that, and it would even led to Fudge first picking Renekton in game 1. And so I think that generally speaking, 100 Thieves should have the priority and the agency in the game to make these wins happen. And I think that they'll be able to do it. But I think it'll be a 5-game series, and I think it'll really come down in a lot of ways to their mentality. They're probably going to drop some games here against Dig. They might have a big throw or two. And if they can bounce back, then I think they'll be okay. But they are looking shaky.
All right, well, there's our playoff predictions. We got some anchor questions now from you guys. The first one here is going to come from Garrett Neuman.
Hey guys, Jedi here. Big fan of the show. So as Bjergsen has moved into a coaching role, what kind of success does he need as a coach to be considered a better coach than a player? Thanks.
A lot. This is a multiple MVP, dominated the league for years and years and years and years. I feel like not only do they need to stack up titles, he would need international success, 100%.
Yeah.
Get out of groups twice.
1,000%. I think you need to do more than get out of groups. I think you definitely need to win a best of 5 in at Worlds to be able to say that. And honestly, he's not going to be able to do it in a year, even 2 years. one of the things about Bjergsen is he was consistently every freaking year top of the table mid laner, and the reason for so many of these seasons why TSM was a contender. So like, yeah, you're going to have to do a lot, and you're going to have to do it consistently over several years, because it's that's not something you can make up quickly.
Yeah, I think it's like you're stacking his whole career against
or
one
win worlds
split right now.
I take it back. You could do it in 1 year. Win worlds. I give it to you.
Yeah, there you go. It's possible if he has some insanely, like TSM has some insane run this year, but otherwise you're stacking up a full career as a player against one split as a coach. And something that happens with a lot of like in traditional sports when pro players become coaches is like they actually have some tenure of success at some point in their careers often, but it's sometimes not sustained the same way like a high level of play is easier sustained for an individual player, whereas a coach you have to be measured on your team's success, and that's harder to do because you can be a great player surrounded by crappy teammates and you're still dropping 30 a game in basketball or something, and everyone acknowledges that's still a great player, but you're a losing team, whereas that doesn't exist for a coach. You can't drop 30 a game, and so it's a lot harder to have this kind of run of success as a coach in a lot of ways because there's no individual component to it. So it is really hard to have, when you're one of the all-time great players, it is really hard to have a better coaching career, if not outright impossible. I can't think of a player who was considered one of the greatest of all time, then becoming one of the greatest of all time coaches in traditional sports.
I think it's a really good point. It's also because of the way in which Bjergsen had success with TSM. It wasn't just that he won titles, it was that he is constantly looked at as the reason that they won. Like he's just the difference maker. Bjergsen's just going to take over the game and 1v9, and you're going to win because of this guy. And everyone kind of looked at it in so many cases as, that's just Bjergsen diff. And that is really, really hard to achieve as a coach, but would be cool to see if he could do it. I wish him the best. One of the mainstays of the scene for so long. Definitely a legend. All right, next question comes here from Thomas Lukashow.
With off-season roster moves, expectations for 100 Thieves were high, and as of right now, they're not living up to them. If this 100 Thieves roster can't, at a minimum, beat the 2020 Golden Guardians' sixth place finish, what roster moves may or may not need to occur, or do you question if the coaching staff is the correct fit? Of course, teams around them have gotten better, but what do you guys think? Thanks, guys.
What do you think about jungle? Everybody's going to immediately jump to mid lane because obviously they have two mid laners. But yeah, if they don't, like this is the doomsday scenario where they have this terrible, bomb out placing for 100 Thieves. Honestly, what about jungle? Like that's an import slot for you, and it is.
Oh, I see what you're saying now.
It has not been. I feel like that's one of the roles where. I do feel like there are a lot of importable junglers that you could go after right now with so many. Like as a jungler, I spend a lot of time on opg.gg looking at replays and stuff from like high LCK or just Korean solo queue players, and there's a ton of jungle talent that is importable.
I thought you were gonna say go resident for NA for jungler and find an import mid.
Oh no, I was actually just straight up change imports.
Yeah, I mean either way to this conversation, you can see that there are different avenues to pursue. It does feel a little bit premature because we don't know what's going to happen in the rest of this.
Of course it is. That's the point of the question, Mark. It's that.
Well, and it's saying if they bomb out. You're living in that world, Mark. They've bombed out. They lost their series against Dignitas. What do you do?
Boy, I mean, I don't know how.
Good trying to dodge the question, Mark.
No, I misunderstood it first. I was thinking that this was like if they get 5th, 6th in summer because that's when they got 5th, 6th previously. Was that playoff run? So I thought he was referencing a similar run in playoffs in summer. What do you do in that offseason?
Good stalling.
Because
this off. What's your answer?
I'm saying this offseason is really compressed. Like I don't know what it's going to look like. How possible are roster moves right now with the changes? I don't know, and I don't think that they have great choices behind them in their academy system, for example, to make obvious swaps. You probably start looking for trades like bring back Honser. I don't know. Well, you have to start looking at some of those things.
and with the talk of import slot earlier, Ken V up and import mid was kind of what you were touching on there.
Right, but what the problem is, what mid can you get in the middle of the split that you feel really good about currently?
Yeah, it's tough halfway through the year for sure. But I think they would definitely be exploring options, and they would be considering everything, from staff changes to player changes, 100%, because they were expecting, I think, to be challenging for a championship, and it's not looking like it right now. And especially in your scenario where they lost to Dignitas, they'll definitely have everything on the table, I think, as far as mixing things up.
And I'm just gonna say, bottom lane is safe. They get a pass from me, okay? If you're making changes, probably around mid jungle.
He's out of support. He's going mid. Bring back
down,
the Aurelian Soul.
But if you mess with that bottom lane, I'm gonna have some words, okay?
All right. Next question here. This one comes from Twitter. It is from Andrew. All right. Andrew says, excuse me, I just lost
What
that.
are your favorite little tricks in solo queue to get you advantages?
I
mean, there's.
Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, this is just the generic advice, like the pick a role, main a couple, like a small champion pool, so you learn all those things. But if you're talking like little tricks, I mean, there's the dodge that all the pro players are talking about.
Damn it, Mark! I don't say that. You're contributing to my long ass queue times here. Fully through champ select. Mark's dodging out 1 second, wasting my goddamn life. I got better things to do. I got better things to do than get Mark a slightly better chance in his freaking champ select. Honestly, if you're gonna do a champ select change, here's a little trick that won't get everybody else mad for you dodging. I always offer to pick for anybody later in the draft, especially solo laners. As jungler, I honestly don't care. I can blind pick my jungler, no problem. And it goes a long way to make sure that you don't have a blind pick Kassadin on your team getting Kiana counterpicked or something like that. Let me tell you, because I had one yesterday and he went 0-9.
And everyone likes you now. Now how we're talking about everyone hates their jungler. If you give them the lower draft pick, later draft pick, then you get a little bit of goodwill stored up.
They like you until the other jungler ganks them one time.
Exactly.
So you get that early game though. You get a little bit of time in there.
Azael's learning quick. He knows. He said auto-filled some jungle games already. He's like, that goodwill.
It goes quick. You get them 3 kills early. They get ganked one time. Goddamn jungle difference. All right. A trick for me. I actually think there's some level 1 invades that aren't used much that are so consistently good. People just like run straight through Pixel Brush by mid and in a lot of their invades. And I actually feel like, so if you're playing red side, you go down past your blue buff and then you go right through the river into that brush, right? That's by bot lane. And you go from that brush down against like the lower wall over by where they're trying to try brush is, and you walk along that wall in. By the time they see you, it's like you're actually on top of their head. You have to walk through your river brush and then down so that they don't have any kind of pre-warning. But that one, oh my God, I swear, you get so many kills just walking through that brush. Either people are lazy and are guarding it and you can wrap around on their red from below, or someone is guarding it. And by the time they see you, you're literally in melee range. Like it's a really good invade. It's one that people never really prepare for in solo queue. So I would say just some of these level 1s you can find from pro and things, and just spam assist ping for your team to go to these things. A lot of times people just follow you.
And even if you don't get a kill, you know how far and a deep ward early game goes for your jungler? It's actually so insanely easy to track enemy jungler for the early stages. And every time I don't spend like 7 spam pings of the entire jungle path of the enemy jungler, you know how many times a full clear from bottom to top at 3.5 minutes has resulted in a top laner death?
There's nothing you can do about that. Can't avoid that.
Every time. That's how many times. So just put a freaking ward in there, do a red buff invade or something like that.
I think that's going to stop them. They know where they are. They just don't care.
Yeah. You should have been here, dum dum. You're pinging it. You're pinging him. Where's my counter?
There's a
gank?
cannon minion. What do you want me to do?
All right. Thank you guys for the questions. That'll wrap it up for this episode of The Dive. Thank you, Honda, for making this episode possible. And remember, you can check us out Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Anchor.fm, especially the new YouTube channel, youtube.com/LCS. Be sure to sub there. You can continue to send us your questions on Twitter, on Anchor with the voice messages as well. And keep leaving us the funny Apple reviews. We love to read them on air if we get a good one. The Mid-Season Showdown continues this weekend with Evil Geniuses versus TSM on Saturday, March 27th, and then Dignitas versus 100 Thieves on Sunday, the 28th. As always, we will see you again next Tuesday, bright and early for all you West Coasters, and 8 a.m. for all the East Coasters.